Greg Whittle is a talented left-handed artist. However, his talent has gone unnoticed. Greg works in a small company as a technical support consultant. All he can do is draw a beautiful world on paper and stash the drawings in his briefcase so no one will ever see them. In Greg's personal life, there are also many problems. He has long been divorced and only has rare meetings and conversations with his children. Right in the middle of his workday, Greg gets a call from his daughter, Emily. She asks him to come to her graduation, but Greg doesn't want to see his ex-wife, so he asks Emily to reschedule the meeting for another day when they can be alone. Greg has to interrupt his conversation with his daughter to answer work calls and listen to a colleague who delivers a message from the boss. Hiding his drawings and showing his colleague the door, Greg pulls out a pack of pills, but it's empty. He calls the pharmacy to order more, but they refuse, asking for a fresh prescription from his doctor. This worsens his mood, and Greg struggles to keep himself together. In a rush, Greg forgets his wallet on the desk and runs out of the office. He heads to meet his boss, only to receive more bad news. Due to endless mistakes and missed calls, Greg is fired. The news shocks Greg so much that for a moment he zones out and freezes. His boss approaches him to snap him out of it, but it turns out to be a mistake. Startled, Greg lashes out and pushes his boss hard. The heavy-set man falls to the floor, hitting his head on the edge of the table. Greg realizes what he's done but can't bring himself to call for help. He drags the body to the window and hooks the boss's shirt sleeves onto the window handles to hide him behind the dark curtain. Greg tells the secretary that the boss is still unavailable and that he will come back after lunch. Meanwhile, Greg heads to a bar to relieve stress and figure out what to do next. He orders a strong drink and sits at the bar, but a mysterious woman seated at a nearby table watches him and beckons Greg over. Isabel, the stranger's name, tells Greg that she knows everything and can help him avoid serious consequences. But in return, Greg must do her a favor. Her ex-boyfriend is hiding in the restroom, and Greg must retrieve a valuable talisman from him. Not fully understanding the situation, Greg follows through with the task and returns to the table with the prized item. He hands it to Isabel and asks her to explain who she is and how she knows about the boss's unfortunate fate. The woman claims that everything around them is fake. Only she, Greg, and the stricken ex-boyfriend are real. The rest are virtual characters in a simulation. As proof, Isabel keeps her promise. She uses some supernatural abilities to make Greg's boss accidentally fall out of the window, clearing all suspicions from Greg. For extra safety, she allows Greg to approach his colleagues and establish an alibi for the time of the incident. Despite this, Isabel convinces Greg to hide for a while during the investigation at her hideout. She sells a friend's phone for $10, and the pair heads to the outskirts of town to a homeless encampment. By evening, Greg learns that his boss's death has officially been declared an accident and that there are no suspects in the case. He could leave the camp now, but for some reason, Greg wants to stay in the company of his strange new friend and get to know her better. Isabel shows Greg a new trick powers that he possesses. He manages to light candles from a distance with just his mind. Isabel claims that only real people from the real world can do this. Over dinner, Greg shares his fantasies about a dream home with Isabel. He pulls out his drawings and describes a house by the shore, a beautiful land, and a girl in whom Isabel recognizes herself. The hostess is not surprised. Isabel admits to Greg that in another, real world, they are dating and in love with each other. At the same time, Emily visits her brother and asks him to help find their father. But Arthur refuses. He is tired of their father's problems and no longer wants anything to do with him. Without thinking about his children, Greg enjoys his time with Isabel at a roller skating rink. The couple takes golden crystals and it enhances their superpowers. They use their minds to make people fall, laughing as they watch. When the fun ends and the couple steps outside, Greg sees something strange. A police car passes by, with him sitting inside, handcuffed, and where he stood with his friend just a moment ago, a pair of unknown homeless people now appear. Greg spends several hours in jail before being released. All that time, his friend waits for him on the steps of the police station, and the couple decides to celebrate his release with a hearty meal. Emily continues her search for her father. She visits every motel, but no one has seen the man in the photos, and her worry grows. At the cafe, Greg orders 2 portions to go, but he is short on cash and plans to ask Isabel. Suddenly, she hops into a stranger's car and drives away without a word. Greg has to cancel his order and leaves the cafe, unaware that his son catches a glimpse of him in his miserable state. The waiter spots Greg in the backyard and hands him a bag with an expired meal. Just as Greg is about to eat, Isabel returns, drawn by the smell of food, and the pair eats without asking each other any questions. Isabel is struck with a new idea. She leads her friend to a strange neighborhood and asks him to wait outside while she buys some yellow crystals. On the sidewalk, Emily spots her father. She asks the taxi driver to wait and pleads with Greg to come home with her. She fails to convince him, but she leaves her photo with a phone number, asking him to call when he is ready to accept help. During their conversation, Isabel watches from a window, displeased with Greg's interaction with the unreal people from his past life. She insists that Emily isn't real either. To help Greg forget his daughter, Isabel offers him more crystals. At first, Greg refuses, but the appearance of a local gangster forces him to awaken his superpowers and swallow a handful of the substance. Greg believes he managed to lift the thug's car like a tin can. However, a moment later, he has to pay for this effect. In the morning, Greg wakes up in Isabel's camp, but she's not there. He gathers his drawings and leaves, hoping he can now meet Emily. Greg calls his daughter from a payphone and leaves a message on her answering machine. Then he returns to his friend, who wipes tears from her dirty face. Isabel feared that Greg had left her, and she begs him not to call Emily again, fearing that the simulation would tear them apart. To prove to Greg that this is all real, Isabel offers him special blue crystals. She pulls out a box and a strange device from a safe, which will transport them to the real world from this simulation, and Greg will be able to remember everything. Greg takes the crystals and inserts the device into his nose. Within seconds, he regains consciousness in a secret laboratory where he discovers that he and Isabel are scientists working on a special project, a giant memory tank that transfers people to a parallel reality. The goal of the project is to show people a horrible life so that they will appreciate their beautiful, ideal world. Now it's time for the scientists to return to reality for a short while, but Greg feels strange. He remembers nothing and can't understand how it's possible. Looking at a photo of his daughter, he doesn't recognize her at all. In this world, he is indeed in a relationship with Isabel. She invites her boyfriend for a walk, and the pair finds themselves on the streets of a beautiful city where living people coexist in peace and harmony with the ghosts of those long gone. The city seems like a paradise to Greg, especially when he sees his home. A palace by the shore that looks exactly like the one in his drawings. Nearby, Isabel shows him an observatory from which they can stargaze, but Greg remembers nothing. It feels like a dream to him, and he feels like he's never been to this amazing place. While Greg and Isabel enjoy the perfect world, Emily resumes her search for her father to help him. But Greg doesn't need help. He has finally arrived in the world of his fantasies. Isabel shows him the device that Greg himself invented, though he doesn't remember it either, a thought visualizer. On a large screen, everything Greg thinks about appears, turning into a colorful cartoon. The happiness doesn't last long. Isabel says they must return to the simulation. She is convinced it's necessary to protect the perfect world from the disasters that plagued it before the simulation's invention. But Greg manages to convince his friend to stay for at least one more day to enjoy the beautiful world in which he feels light and carefree. The couple spends the precious time truly happy. They relax on a yacht, swim, walk the city streets, and attend a lavish party. But an unpleasant event occurs. An old man tells Greg that Isabel's research is not yielding results and that she should rethink her approach. Her device, which transports everyone to the sad world, is not working as it should. This infuriates Isabel, but Greg manages to lead her away and continue the celebration. Emily watches everything unfold from a distance. In this world, she appears like a ghost and cannot be near her father. In the morning, Isabel won't let her friend enjoy the beautiful atmosphere and cool pool. She insists they return to the simulation so she can continue her experiment and prove her point to everyone. But Greg convinces his friend that there's no need for that. She can claim success, and her method of transporting people into the simulation will resonate with others. Something goes wrong. During Greg's interview, his personality seems to split, and one of the Gregs says things that frighten the real Greg. Later, his doubts grow. He sees the ghost of Emily at the party and tries to catch her. Greg chases after his daughter, and when he finally catches up, Emily assures him that there is no beautiful world, and all of it is just Greg's fantasies. She reminds her father that he has 2 children who need him, and he will have to choose them or this perfect world. Everything starts to blur. People from the simulation appear in the perfect world. They loudly chant something, and the crowd sweeps Isabel away. To save her, Greg takes several yellow crystals and, using his super strength, pushes people aside. The couple escapes from the party and steps outside, but now it's not as perfect as it was before. The world changes every second, and it becomes dangerous. The scientists struggle to return to the lab and take their places. Isabel's assistant presses a button, and the young couple is transported back to the gray world on the outskirts of the city. The travelers between worlds search for the crystal dealer. While Isabel tries to get his address, Greg notices his boss outside the window, alive and well in the company of office staff. But no one wants to explain to Greg how it happened or why the boss is alive. Isabel drags her friend away to avoid the police and to quickly get the crystals. The couple steals a car from a parking lot and drives to the given address. They find the dealer, but he doesn't get the chance to say anything. Isabel destroys him, hoping he will wake up in the other, real world. The fugitives return to their camp to take the blue crystals and go back to the paradise world. But it turns out that the dealer had only one batch, and they won't be able to transfer together this time. There aren't enough crystals for both of them. With the sound of police sirens approaching, the couple tries to figure out what to do next. Greg asks his friend to destroy him so he too can leave this world and remain free. Emily arrives at the scene and rushes to the bridge to find out what happened to her father. The girl yells from the bridge, but the police pull her back to the car. Hearing his daughter's voice, Greg changes his mind. He asks Isabel to save herself while he chooses to stay in this world and enjoy it despite all its hardships and problems. Isabel kisses her friend goodbye and walks toward the police. While she distracts them, Greg slips away unnoticed from the camp and runs through the streets to find help and escape this state. The man walks for several hours without stopping. Finally, he comes across a sign that reads, "Safe Harbor, a rehabilitation center for the sick and addicted." Greg is given the floor in a circle of like-minded individuals, but he remains silent for a long time, unsure where to begin. Finally, he pulls out a photo of Emily and admits that he doesn't remember this girl, but wants to believe she is truly his daughter. Months later, Emily waits for her father in a park near the rehab center. He comes to her with a bouquet of flowers and the hope that they now have a new life ahead of them. This is where the movie ends.